Clara lived in a small town at the edge of a dense forest. The forest was old, with tall trees whose leaves blocked most of the sunlight. People in the town often said strange things happened in the forest, but Clara never believed them. She liked the forest because it was quiet, and she could walk her dog Benny without seeing many people. One early morning, Clara decided to take a longer path through the forest. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Birds chirped in the trees, and Benny ran happily ahead, sniffing everything along the path. Clara walked slowly, enjoying the peace. Then she noticed something unusual. Between the thick trees, she saw the outline of a small house. It was made of old wood, dark and weathered by time, but the most strange thing was that it had no doors. Clara frowned. How could a house have no doors? She stepped closer, curious and a little uneasy. Benny stopped beside her and growled softly. Clara put a hand on his head and whispered, "It is okay, boy. Let's just look." The house had small windows. Through one of them she could see shadows moving inside. It was too dark to see clearly, but she thought she heard voices. They were faint, almost like whispers, but there was something odd. The voices were not normal. They sounded strange and rhythmical. Clara's heart started to beat faster. She wanted to walk away, but curiosity held her in place. Clara moved around the house looking for an entrance, but there was none. She tapped on the walls, but they were solid and made a dull sound. The house felt alive in some way. She pressed her ear against one of the windows. The voices became clearer, but they were not saying words she recognized. They sounded like patterns repeating over and over. Clara stepped back. She felt a chill run down her spine. Benny barked once sharply. Clara turned to see him staring at a tree. She followed his gaze, but there was nothing unusual. Still, the forest felt different. The air was colder near the house, and the sounds of birds and wind seemed to fade. Clara realized the forest itself seemed to be watching her. She remembered stories from her childhood. People said the forest was older than the town and that strange things sometimes appeared there. Children who wandered too far would vanish for hours, sometimes days. Adults said it was just the forest, nothing more. Clara had always laughed at these stories. Now, looking at the doorless house, she wondered if there was some truth to them. Clara wanted to get a closer look at the windows. She knelt down and peeked inside. The room was dim, but she could see movement. Shadows shifted in ways that did not make sense. There seemed to be objects floating in the air, and the voices became louder as she listened. Her mind tried to understand what was happening, but nothing in her life had prepared her for this. Suddenly, a sound made her jump. It was a low hum, almost like a vibration coming from the house itself. The air around her seemed to shimmer, as if the sunlight was bending strangely. Benny growled again. Clara pulled back, realizing that the house might be more than just wood and nails. It might be alive in a way she could not understand. Clara took out her phone. She wanted to take a picture, but the moment she raised it, the camera screen showed only darkness. No matter how she adjusted the angle, the house remained black, as if it absorbed all light. She felt a strange pull, almost as if the house was aware of her presence. Fear mixed with fascination. She had to see more, but she also had to be careful. She took a step closer to the nearest window. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch the glass. The surface was cool, smooth, and slightly sticky. The voices inside became louder, but they were still patterns she could not understand. Then suddenly they stopped. Clara froze. Silence fell over the forest. Benny stopped moving and looked around nervously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she heard a whisper, so soft that she could barely catch it. It sounded like a human voice, but it was different, strange. It said, "We see you." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She stumbled back, and Benny barked loudly. The whisper came again. "We know you." Clara realized she could not explain what she was seeing. The house had no doors, yet it seemed alive. The voices sounded intelligent, like they were studying her. The forest felt different, as if it was holding its breath. She had no idea if she should run or stay. Curiosity pulled her forward, fear pulled her back. She decided to go home and think. She did not want to stay near the house alone, not without understanding more. As she walked back, Benny close by her side, she kept looking over her shoulder. The house remained still, quiet, almost waiting for her next move. Clara felt that this was only the beginning. Something was hidden in that forest, something she could not ignore. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the sun was higher in the sky. Clara felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She knew she had discovered something extraordinary. She could not explain it, and she was not sure she wanted to, but she knew she would return. She needed to understand the house without doors and the voices that came from inside. Clara spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, but her mind kept returning to the house. She studied old maps of the forest, trying to see if the house appeared anywhere. Nothing. She checked town records, old photographs, anything that might explain it. There was no trace of the house ever existing. It was as if it had appeared overnight, hidden from everyone else. That evening, Clara made a decision. She would return to the forest, but this time she would bring tools to observe safely. She would record the sounds, take notes, and try to understand what she had discovered. Something told her this was not just a forest mystery. It was something bigger. Something that might change the way she saw the world. Clara went to bed that night with a mind full of questions. The forest was silent outside her window, but she felt the presence of the house even from far away. She wondered if it was waiting for her return, and she realized that whatever was inside it had already noticed her. Clara closed her eyes, knowing that tomorrow she would step into a mystery that could not be ignored. The next morning, Clara woke up before sunrise. Her mind was restless, filled with questions about the house in the forest. She could not stop thinking about the strange voices she had heard yesterday. She knew she needed to return and see if she could understand more. Benny, her faithful dog, wagged his tail as if he knew something important was about to happen. Clara prepared her bag with care. She brought a flashlight, a notebook, and her phone to record sounds. She also packed a small first aid kit just in case. She told herself she would be cautious and careful. She had to know the truth about the house. As she stepped into the forest, the morning fog covered the trees, giving the forest an eerie look. The air smelled fresh but carried a hint of mystery. Walking slowly, Clara followed the path she had taken yesterday. Benny ran ahead, sniffing the ground and marking the familiar scents. Clara felt a strange excitement mixed with fear. When she reached the clearing where the house appeared, she froze. It was exactly as she had seen before, yet somehow different. The shadows in the windows moved, but there were no shapes she could recognize. Clara stepped closer, keeping her flashlight in hand. The house had no doors, and the wall seemed unchanged, yet the air around it hummed softly. She pressed her ear against one of the windows. This time the sounds inside were clearer. They were not human voices, but patterns of sound, repeating in a rhythm. They rose and fell almost like music, but it was too precise, too perfect to be music. Clara whispered to herself, "What are you?" She shivered as she realized the house was not empty. It was alive in some strange way. Benny growled softly, sensing her tension. Clara adjusted the flashlight to shine inside the window. Shadows danced across the walls, moving in ways that made no sense. Some floated in the air, some shifted like mist. Clara could not recognize the shapes, but she felt they were watching her. She opened her notebook and began writing what she saw and heard. She described the shadows, the patterns of sound, and the strange feeling in the air. She noticed that the voices repeated certain sequences over and over. It was almost as if they were communicating in a language she could not understand. The rhythm and structure seemed intelligent, organized, and purposeful. Suddenly, the pattern changed. The soft rhythm turned into a series of distinct sounds, almost like words. Clara leaned closer to listen. She could make out a few syllables, but they did not form any language she knew. Then she realized the sounds were reacting to her presence. When she moved, they changed. When she stayed still, they repeated the same sequence. Clara felt a mixture of fear and fascination. She was witnessing something alive, something aware. Benny barked sharply. Clara jumped back, startled. She saw a shadow move quickly across the room inside the house. It was different from before. It seemed larger, more solid, yet it had no clear shape. She tried to focus, but her eyes could not keep up with the movement. The shadow stopped suddenly and pressed against the window for a brief moment. Clara froze, staring at the dark shape. It felt like it was observing her, trying to understand her. Her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She raised her phone to record the sounds. The moment she did, the house seemed to vibrate slightly. Clara felt the hum in the air grow stronger. The patterns of sound intensified and the shadows moved faster. The house was alive, reacting to her attempt to record it. Clara realized that she had discovered something extraordinary. She was standing in front of a living structure that could sense and respond. Clara sat down on the ground, careful to stay out of reach of the shadows. She pressed record on her phone and listened closely. The voices inside repeated a sequence that sounded almost like instructions. The tone was precise, mechanical, yet alive. She could sense intelligence in the patterns. It was as if the house was learning from her presence. Clara's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what she had found. She wrote down everything in her notebook, including the strange words she could not understand. She tried to imagine what kind of life could exist inside the house. It was not human, not animal, and yet it displayed intelligence. Clara felt a sense of awe. Humans had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now she had discovered something extraordinary on Earth itself. As she continued observing, Clara noticed a faint light inside the house. It pulsed slowly, synchronized with the sounds. The light seemed to move through the shadows, forming shapes for brief moments. Clara could see what looked like geometric patterns, impossible angles, and floating shapes that defied gravity. The house was not just alive. It was experimenting, creating, and possibly learning. Benny barked again, and Clara realized how long she had been there. The sun had risen higher, and the forest felt warmer. She stood up and took a step back. The house seemed to pause, the sounds and movements slowing down. Clara felt a connection, as if the house was aware of her thoughts and feelings. She realized she had to be careful. She could not simply enter the house, but she had to understand it. Clara decided to observe from a safe distance. She hid behind a tree and continued recording the sounds. She noticed that the patterns repeated every few minutes but changed slightly each time. It was as if the house was learning from her presence, adapting. Clara realized that the intelligence inside the house was advanced, far beyond anything she had imagined. Humans had creativity, intuition, and courage, but this house was analyzing, calculating, and observing. Suddenly, the air grew colder. Clara shivered as a new sound joined the pattern. It was a soft, whispering voice, human-like but different. The voice repeated, "We see you. We know you." Clara's heart pounded. She realized the house was aware not just of her presence but of her intentions. It was observing her mind, her curiosity, her fear. Clara felt a mixture of awe and terror. She knew she could not stay much longer. She gathered her things quietly, careful not to make sudden movements. Benny stayed close, sensing her urgency. As she walked back through the forest, Clara's mind raced with thoughts. The house was alive, intelligent, and possibly dangerous, but it was not hostile yet. It was curious, just like her. She realized that humans had something unique to offer in this situation: intuition, courage, and the ability to act. Back at home, Clara played the recordings on her laptop. The patterns of sound were clear, repeating, and complex. She could not understand them, but she could see the structure. It was as if the house was trying to communicate, but in a language she had never heard. Clara felt both excitement and responsibility. She had discovered something extraordinary, and humans might be the only ones who could understand and respond to it. Clara spent the rest of the day researching. She looked for similar cases in books, online articles, and old local stories. Nothing matched what she had seen. The house was unique, and the intelligence inside it was beyond anything recorded. She realized that this was just the beginning. She had to return to the forest, to observe, to learn, and to understand what she had found. That night, Clara could not sleep. She thought about the house, the voices, and the shadows. She felt a strange connection to the living structure. She wondered if the intelligence inside the house could be reasoned with, or if it was simply observing and learning. Clara realized that humans had one advantage: the ability to choose, to act with courage, and to use their instincts. She knew that when she returned, she had to be careful, but she also had to face the unknown. As she closed her eyes, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would return to the forest. She would discover the secrets of the house. She would face the unknown with courage. Humans had survived challenges far greater than this. This living house was strange, intelligent, and mysterious, but she believed that humans could meet it with bravery, curiosity, and the power to act. The forest outside her window was quiet, but Clara could still feel the presence of the house. She knew it was waiting, observing and learning. Tomorrow, she would return, ready to face the mystery that had chosen to reveal itself to her. Clara understood that this was not just an adventure. It was a test of human courage, curiosity, and intelligence. She was ready to take the first step. The next morning, Clara could not wait to return to the forest. She knew she needed help. One person was not enough to understand what she had discovered. She called her friend Omar, who loved science and exploration. Omar was always curious about mysteries and strange phenomena. Clara explained what she had seen and heard. She told him about the house with no doors, the voices, the shadows, and the strange patterns of sound. Omar was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Clara, we have to see it for ourselves. But we need to be careful. We do not know what we are dealing with." Clara agreed. They packed a small bag together. This time they brought a portable voice recorder, a camera, a notebook, and extra batteries. Benny, Clara's dog, would accompany them. He had grown used to these morning adventures. As they walked through the forest, the morning sun cast long shadows between the trees. Clara led the way, following the path she had memorized. Omar walked beside her, scanning the forest for anything unusual. Benny ran ahead, sniffing the ground and marking his usual trail. The forest was quiet, but Clara and Omar could feel a strange tension in the air, as if something was watching them. When they reached the clearing, the house appeared exactly as Clara had described. It had no doors, its dark walls standing silently among the trees. The shadows inside seemed to shift slightly, as if they were aware of Clara and Omar's presence. The air was colder here, and the hum from yesterday was faintly present. Clara felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She whispered, "It is just as I saw it. Let us record carefully." Omar nodded. He set up the voice recorder on a small rock near the edge of the clearing. Clara took notes while Benny stayed close to her side. They listened closely. The house responded almost immediately. The sounds inside began as gentle patterns, repeating like before, but then they changed. Clara noticed that the rhythms had become faster, sharper, and more complex. Omar leaned closer to the recorder and whispered, "It is reacting to us. The house knows we are here." Clara shivered. The shadows in the windows moved more distinctly. One shape seemed to take the form of a figure, but it was strange and unrecognizable. It floated in the air and shifted its angles constantly. Clara realized the house was not only alive, but it was observing and learning from them. For several minutes they remained silent, watching and recording. Then the voice patterns changed again. This time they sounded almost like words. Clara could make out a few syllables, but they did not form a language she recognized. Omar listened carefully and said, "This is extraordinary. It is intelligent. It is trying to communicate, but not in a way we understand yet." Clara felt a thrill of discovery. Humans had always wondered if they were alone in the universe, if intelligence existed beyond the world they knew. Now she was seeing it on Earth itself. The house was intelligent, but unlike anything she had imagined. It was alive in a way humans rarely experienced. It observed, learned, and adapted to their presence. Benny barked suddenly, breaking the silence. Clara and Omar jumped back, startled. A shadow moved quickly across the inside of the house. It pressed against one of the windows for a moment, then disappeared. Clara felt a chill. The house was aware of them, and it was studying them closely. Omar whispered, "We need to stay calm and not provoke it. But we also need more information." They continued observing. Clara took careful notes in her notebook, describing the shadows, the sounds, and the movements. Omar adjusted the recorder to capture better sound quality. They realized the patterns repeated, but each time there were subtle differences. It was as if the house was learning, trying to understand them. Clara felt both fear and excitement. This was not a simple forest mystery. It was something alive, something new. As they recorded, Clara noticed a faint glow inside the house. The light moved slowly, pulsing with the rhythm of the sounds. The shadows shifted along with it, forming strange geometric patterns. Clara felt a sense of wonder. The house was creating, experimenting, and possibly learning from them. Omar leaned closer to her and said, "It is like a mind in the walls. We are seeing intelligence in a form we cannot fully understand." The voice patterns grew louder and more distinct. Then, for the first time, Clara and Omar heard a voice that sounded human. It was soft, whispering, and repeated the words, "We see you. We know you." Clara's heart raced. She realized that the house was not just observing, it was aware of their thoughts, their curiosity, and even their fear. It was intelligent in a way humans had never imagined. Clara felt a surge of courage. Humans had always faced the unknown, and this was no different. She whispered to Omar, "We must document everything. This could be the most important discovery of our time." Omar nodded. They continued recording, taking notes, and observing the strange house. Benny stayed close, alert, sensing the unusual presence in the air. Hours passed, and the house continued to react to their presence. The shadows moved constantly, the sounds changed and adapted, and the light pulsed in patterns that seemed to have meaning. Clara and Omar realized that the house was learning from them. It was studying how humans responded, how they moved, how they reacted to fear and curiosity. Clara felt a mix of awe and responsibility. Humans had survived challenges far greater than this. They had faced nature, disasters, and dangers that required intelligence, courage, and adaptability. Now they were facing something equally intelligent. She knew humans had an advantage. They could act with intention, make choices, and use their instincts. The house might be learning, but humans had something it could not predict: intuition and courage. As the sun began to set, Clara and Omar decided to leave. They carefully packed their equipment, keeping the recorder running. The house seemed to react to their departure. The shadows moved more quickly, the sounds intensified, and the light pulsed faster. Clara realized that the house was tracking them, recording everything, and possibly learning from their actions. On their way back, Clara and Omar discussed what they had seen. "This is beyond anything we have ever encountered," Omar said. "It is not just a building, it is alive, intelligent, and aware. We must study this carefully." Clara agreed. She felt a sense of responsibility. Humans had discovered something extraordinary, and it was their job to approach it with caution, intelligence, and courage. Back at Clara's home, they reviewed the recordings. The sounds were complex and structured. Clara noticed subtle patterns that suggested the house was trying to communicate. Omar analyzed the recordings and said, "It is as if it is sending messages in a form we cannot understand yet. This is more than observation. This is interaction." Clara nodded. They both realized the significance of what they had found. That night, Clara could not sleep. She thought about the house, the voices, the shadows, and the strange light. She felt a connection to the living structure. She wondered if it could be reasoned with, if humans could interact with it safely. Clara knew that the house was learning, observing, and possibly adapting. She also knew that humans had something unique to offer: creativity, intuition, and courage. Clara made a plan. They would return to the forest with more equipment, including instruments to measure the light and sound. They would study the house carefully, record everything, and try to understand the intelligence inside. Humans had faced unknown challenges before, and they had survived because of their determination and bravery. Clara believed that they could approach the house the same way. As she drifted to sleep, Clara thought about what they had discovered. The house was not hostile yet, but it was intelligent and aware. Humans had a chance to understand it, interact with it, and possibly learn from it. She realized that this was more than a mystery. It was a challenge, a test of human courage, intelligence, and curiosity. The forest outside her window was quiet, but Clara could still feel the presence of the house. She knew it was waiting, observing, and learning. Tomorrow they would return, ready to face the unknown with courage, curiosity, and the determination that humans had shown throughout history. Clara understood that this was only the beginning. The house was alive, intelligent, and mysterious, and humans had a chance to meet it on their terms. Clara could not stop thinking about the house. Every moment of her day was filled with its shadows, its strange sounds, and the pulsing light that seemed alive. She had spent hours reviewing the recordings from the previous visit. Omar had joined her again to analyze the patterns. Together they noticed something unusual. The sounds were not random. There were repetitions and changes that suggested intelligence beyond ordinary understanding. "This is not just observation," Omar said, pointing at the graph on his laptop. "It is learning. The house is analyzing everything we do. It adapts, changes, and repeats patterns differently based on our actions. Clara nodded, her heart racing. She felt a mixture of awe and fear. The house was alive, and it was aware of them in ways they could not fully understand. Humans had always faced challenges, but this was unlike anything before. They prepared carefully for the next trip. Clara packed her notebook, the voice recorder, a camera, a flashlight, and a small set of sensors they could use to detect changes in the air, light, and sound around the house. Omar carried his laptop and additional batteries. Benny, as always, was ready to explore. They walked through the forest in silence, each step careful, alert, and full of anticipation. When they arrived at the clearing, the house appeared unchanged, but there was a difference. The shadows inside moved faster, sharper, and more complex than before. The pulsing light inside had a rhythm, almost like it was breathing. Clara could feel a subtle vibration in the air, as if the house itself was aware of their approach. She whispered to Omar, "It knows we are here. It is waiting." Omar nodded. They set up the equipment at a safe distance. Clara pressed record on the voice recorder, while Omar activated the sensors. Benny stayed close to Clara, growling softly at the shifting shadows inside the house. The sounds began as usual, gentle and patterned, but soon the rhythms changed. The patterns were no longer simple. They had structure, organization, and a strange intelligence. Clara wrote quickly in her notebook. She noticed that the sounds seemed to react to her movements. When she leaned closer, the patterns intensified. When she remained still, they slowed but repeated carefully. Omar analyzed the readings from the sensors. "The house is responding to us in real time," he said. "It is like a living mind, a system that learns from our presence and adapts constantly." Suddenly, the shadows in the windows shifted dramatically. One appeared more solid than before, forming angles and shapes that Clara could not describe. It pressed against the window for a long moment, then vanished. A new sound joined the sequence, a whispering voice, human-like, soft but clear. "We understand. We are learning. We are waiting." Clara's heart pounded. The house was communicating, not in words she could understand, but in intention, rhythm, and movement. Clara realized something important. The house was not hostile, not yet. It was intelligent and curious. Humans had faced unknown challenges before and survived through observation, courage, and ingenuity. She felt a surge of determination. This was a chance to interact, to observe, and to learn from something beyond human understanding. It was a challenge, but one humans could meet. They continued their observation for several hours. The house seemed to test them. When Clara moved closer, the shadows reacted. When Omar tried to measure the light, the pulsing shifted. The sounds became more complex, repeating in sequences that suggested calculation and adaptation. Clara wrote in her notebook, "The house is learning from our actions. It can anticipate, adjust, and respond. Humans have an advantage because we can think creatively and act with courage." As they worked, Clara noticed a new pattern in the recordings. The sequences of sound were not just reactions. They were messages. The house was trying to communicate something beyond observation. It had a rhythm, a structure, and a repetition that suggested intention. Clara felt excitement. This was not just a living house. It was an intelligent system capable of learning and possibly reasoning. Omar studied the patterns closely. "It is sending messages in a code we cannot understand yet," he said. "Humans have the ability to act, to choose, to interpret. That is our strength. We can understand what it is trying to communicate if we pay close attention and remain patient." Clara agreed. She felt responsibility and courage. Humans were explorers, problem solvers, and survivors. They could face intelligence far beyond their own if they used creativity and determination. Then, something unexpected happened. A new sound joined the sequence, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to fill the air around them. The shadows inside the house began to shift rapidly. Clara realized that the house was not just observing. They were being studied in detail. The house could analyze behavior, emotion, and thought in ways Clara could not comprehend. Yet she felt a strange connection. The house was alive, intelligent, and aware, but it had not attacked or harmed them. It seemed curious, like humans observing a new species for the first time. Clara whispered to Omar, "It is testing us. It wants to understand how we think and act." Omar nodded. "Humans survive by observing, adapting, and acting with courage. This is our advantage. We have to approach carefully, but we cannot fear it. We must meet its intelligence with intelligence of our own." Clara felt a surge of determination. This was a test of human courage and ingenuity. They spent hours recording, observing, and analyzing. Clara noticed subtle changes in the patterns of sound. The house seemed to respond differently to each new movement, each new action. It was learning in real time. The pulsing light inside moved in coordination with the sound, forming complex sequences. Clara realized that the house was capable of understanding rhythm, pattern, and perhaps even emotion. Humans had something unique: intuition and the ability to act with courage and creativity. By the afternoon, Clara and Omar decided to approach closer. They did so slowly, carefully watching the shadows and listening to the sounds. The house responded immediately. The rhythms changed, the light pulsed faster, and the shadows moved in new patterns. Clara felt a thrill of discovery and fear at the same time. She understood that humans had the power to act, to interpret, and to respond, but only if they remained calm and observant. Suddenly, a whispering voice came again, clearer than before. We learn. We adapt. We watch. We wait. Clara felt a shiver. The house was aware of their presence, aware of their thoughts, and aware of their curiosity. Yet it had not harmed them. It seemed to recognize that humans were intelligent and capable of understanding. Clara realized that this was an opportunity. Humans could interact, learn, and perhaps guide the intelligence inside the house. Clara and Omar observed for several more hours. The house's responses grew more complex, more precise. It seemed to create sequences of light and sound that tested their perception, memory, and attention. Clara realized that humans had survived challenges far greater than this by relying on courage, observation, and creativity. The house might be intelligent and adaptive, but humans had a unique ability to act with purpose and interpretation. As the sun began to set, Clara and Omar decided to leave. They carefully packed their equipment, leaving the recorder running. The house responded as they stepped back. The shadows moved quickly, the pulsing light intensified, and the sounds grew louder. Clara understood that the house was recording everything, learning from their presence. Humans had survived through intelligence, courage, and observation, and they would continue to do so. Walking back through the forest, Clara and Omar discussed their discovery. "This is beyond anything humans have faced before," Omar said. "It is intelligent, aware, and capable of learning. But humans have something it cannot predict. Our courage, our creativity, and our ability to act with purpose. We can meet it on our own terms." Clara agreed. She felt a mixture of fear, responsibility, and excitement. Humans had discovered something extraordinary, and they had to approach it with care, intelligence, and courage. That night, Clara could not sleep. She thought about the house, the shadows, the sounds, and the pulsing light. She felt a connection to the living structure, a strange awareness that humans and the house were observing and learning from each other. She realized that the house was not hostile but curious. Humans had a chance to interact, to understand, and to respond intelligently. Clara made a plan. They would return with more equipment, measure the light, record the sounds, and carefully observe the house. Humans had faced unknown challenges before, and they had survived through determination, observation, and courage. She knew that the house was intelligent, adaptive, and aware. Humans had an advantage: intuition, creativity, and the ability to act with purpose. The forest outside her window was silent, but Clara could still feel the presence of the house. She knew it was waiting, learning, and adapting. Tomorrow they would return, ready to meet the unknown with courage, intelligence, and the determination that humans had shown for centuries. Clara understood that this was not just a mystery. It was a challenge, a test of human observation, courage, and intelligence. Humans had a chance to meet it and survive. The next morning, Clara and Omar prepared for their final visit to the forest. Both were aware of the risks, but they knew it was time to understand the house more fully. Clara packed her notebook, the voice recorder, her camera, and a small flashlight. Omar brought additional sensors, his laptop, and batteries. Benny, loyal and alert, followed closely, sensing the tension in the air. Clara could feel a mixture of excitement and fear, knowing the house was intelligent and aware. As they entered the forest, the morning sun filtered through the trees, casting shadows on the path. Clara led the way, remembering each step from the last visits. The air was still unusually quiet. Benny sniffed the ground, alert to every sound. Omar kept glancing at the trees, sensing that something unusual was waiting for them. Clara whispered, "We must remain calm. Observe carefully and remember our advantage. Humans think, humans adapt, and humans act. When they reached the clearing, the house stood exactly as it had before. It had no doors, its dark walls absorbing the sunlight. The shadows inside shifted and pulsed with light, as though the house had sensed their approach. Clara and Omar set up the equipment quickly, keeping a safe distance. The air vibrated faintly, filled with a soft hum that seemed alive. The house was aware, studying them as they had studied it. They activated the voice recorder and sensors. At first, the house responded with gentle patterns of sound, slow and rhythmic. Clara and Omar watched and wrote in their notebooks. The shadows moved in complex sequences, forming shapes that defied description. The pulsing light shifted in a pattern synchronized with the sounds. Clara realized the house was sending signals, communicating through rhythm, pattern, and movement. Then the house changed its behavior. The patterns of sound became louder, sharper, and faster. The shadows moved quickly, forming angles and shapes that seemed to respond directly to their actions. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. The house was testing them, analyzing how they reacted to new stimuli. She whispered, "It is trying to learn everything about us. Our fear, our courage, our decisions. We have to act carefully and wisely." Omar nodded. "Humans survive by observing, thinking, and acting with courage. We have an advantage because we can choose. We can respond intelligently. That is what the house cannot predict fully." Clara felt a surge of determination. Humans had faced unknown challenges throughout history. They had survived disasters, natural dangers, and complex mysteries by observing, thinking, and acting with courage. Now they faced an intelligent structure, and their survival depended on their ingenuity. Hours passed as they observed. Clara noticed a new pattern in the sequences of sound. The house seemed to be sending messages, using rhythm and repetition to convey intention. The shadows inside moved in coordination with the pulsing light. Clara whispered, "It is trying to communicate. We may not understand the words, but it has a message. We need to listen carefully and record everything." Omar agreed. They continued to record, observing every change, every shift in light and sound. Suddenly, the house responded in a new way. The pulsing light intensified. The shadows moved faster and the patterns of sound became sharper and clearer. Clara felt a strange pressure in the air, as if the house wanted them to notice something urgent. Benny growled, his fur standing on end. Clara realized that the house had become more active, more aware of their presence than ever before. She stepped back and whispered to Omar, "It is aware of everything. It has learned from us, but humans have courage, creativity, and intuition. We must use our minds to respond, not just observe." Omar nodded. They watched and waited, knowing that their next actions could determine how the house reacted. Clara felt a mixture of fear and excitement. This was a test, but humans were capable of meeting challenges like this. Suddenly, the voice from the house became clear. A soft whisper, human-like but unfamiliar, repeated, "We see you. We know you. You must choose." Clara and Omar exchanged a look. The house was aware of their presence, their curiosity, and their intentions. It was testing them, waiting to see how humans would respond. Clara realized the importance of acting wisely, calmly, and with courage. Clara took a deep breath. "We cannot provoke it, but we can show intelligence. Humans survive because we observe, think, and act with courage. We have to demonstrate that we are aware, careful, and responsible." Omar nodded. They continued recording and observing, paying attention to every change in sound, light, and shadow. Benny stayed close, alert to every movement in the air. Then something extraordinary happened. The pulsing light formed a pattern that looked like a geometric shape Clara had studied in her science books. The shadows moved in alignment with the pattern. Clara realized the house was demonstrating something, trying to convey understanding through light, movement, and sound. It was teaching them, inviting them to interpret. Clara whispered, "It is showing us. It wants communication. It wants understanding. We must pay attention." Omar adjusted the sensors to record the pattern. They took notes quickly, capturing every detail. Clara felt a mixture of awe and excitement. Humans were observing intelligence beyond anything they had seen before. The house was alive, aware, and adaptive. But humans had something it could not fully anticipate: creativity, courage, and the ability to act with purpose. As they studied the patterns, the voice from the house became insistent. "We wait. We learn, we test. You must choose. Clara realized that the house was not just communicating. It was inviting them to make a choice. Humans faced unknown challenges throughout history, and they had survived by acting with courage, intelligence, and determination. Now they faced another test, and the outcome depended on their decisions. Clara turned to Omar. We must call for help. Humans survive by acting wisely and using all available resources. We cannot predict what this house will do next. We need assistance, guidance, and expertise. This is beyond us, but humans work together, and together we can respond intelligently. Omar agreed. They activated Clara's phone and called 911. The operator listened carefully as Clara explained everything. The house with no doors, the shadows, the pulsing light, and the intelligent sounds. Clara's voice was calm but urgent. It is alive, aware, and intelligent. We have observed it for several days. It is not hostile yet, but it is adaptive. We need experts to study it safely. The operator promised to send assistance immediately. Clara felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Humans were capable of facing unknown challenges, but they often needed collaboration and support. While waiting, Clara and Omar continued to observe the house from a safe distance. The pulsing light and moving shadows reacted to their presence but did not attack. Clara realized that humans had demonstrated intelligence and caution, which the house recognized. It was observing, learning, and adapting. Humans had survived challenges like this throughout history because of careful observation, courage, and ingenuity. Soon, emergency vehicles arrived. Scientists and experts in various fields stepped into the forest, equipped with advanced instruments and protective gear. Clara and Omar guided them to the clearing, explaining what they had observed. The experts were amazed by the house, its shadows, its pulsing light, and the patterns of sound. They began setting up sensors, recording devices, and cameras to study the phenomenon safely. Clara watched as humans worked together, combining courage, intelligence, and resourcefulness. She realized that humans had an advantage, the ability to collaborate, observe carefully, and act decisively. The house continued to respond, adapting to the new presence and the additional observations. Clara felt a sense of pride and awe. Humans were facing intelligence beyond their understanding, and they were responding with courage, creativity, and careful reasoning. Hours passed as the team collected data. The house continued its patterns, pulsing light and moving shadows in complex sequences. Clara and Omar recorded everything, taking notes and assisting the scientists. Benny stayed close, alert to every movement. Clara realized that the house was learning from them, but humans had already demonstrated an advantage. They could act with courage, interpret patterns, and respond intelligently. As night fell, the house's movement slowed and the pulsing light dimmed slightly. The patterns of sound became softer, rhythmic, almost peaceful. Clara felt a mixture of relief and wonder. Humans had faced the unknown with courage, observation, and intelligence. The house was still alive, aware, and adaptive, but it had recognized the human's ability to act responsibly and wisely. Clara whispered to Omar, "We have shown it that humans are intelligent and capable. We observed, we acted with care, and we sought help. Humans survive because we think, we act, and we face the unknown with courage. This is our advantage," Omar smiled. "Yes, humans have creativity, courage, and determination. We have faced challenges before, and we will survive this one too." The team continued to study the house safely through the night. The recordings captured every detail, every pattern, and every sound. Clara felt a sense of accomplishment. Humans had confronted the unknown, observed carefully, and acted wisely. The house remained a mystery, but humans had demonstrated their ability to face it intelligently. By morning, the experts concluded that the house was a unique, adaptive intelligence.